What is going on, everyone? It is me, Lone, and I'm very excited to say that for the past few days, I've been playing an early copy of Atomic Heart, the FPS action role-playing game being developed by Mundfish. Mundfish was founded in 2017, and Atomic Heart is the very first game they have made with a team of just 130 employees. Atomic Heart has been on my radar for a long time now, especially because of the game's clear inspiration from BioShock, a series which remains one of my most beloved of all time. And while I've seen some people write this game off as just being a Russian BioShock clone, I'm happy to say that this game for me is much more than that. The team at Mundfish has created something awesome. Now, full transparency, this code was provided to me for free for review purposes, and I still haven't finished the game yet. Having a full-time job will do that to you. While Mundfish has said the game will take around 25 hours to complete as a standard run, a slower completionist playthrough will take more like 40 hours, and that's exactly what I'm doing, clocking in so far at about 20 hours of gameplay. However, I feel like I've played just enough to provide my thoughts on the game. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. So let me set the platform of Atomic Heart for you. There are no spoilers here, only a brief overview of the game's plot. Atomic Heart is set in the year 1955 in an alternate reality where the USSR is at the pinnacle of a technological revolution, all thanks to one man, Dmitry Sechenov. Sechenov, together with his team, created a groundbreaking new substance called polymers, which led to further breakthroughs in many fields including robotics, cosmology, and more. Life on Earth, especially in the USSR, has completely changed, with humans living side by side with their new friendly robot friends. Sechenov's team is also ready to launch a new version of the collective neural network, together with a new thought device which will enable humans to control robots with their mind. The world is truly a utopia. Well, I'm guessing you know what happens next. Something does go horribly wrong, and your character, Major P3, is sent to Facility 3826, the top secret USSR base where the robots are being manufactured in order to fix this mess. P3 is accompanied by Charles, an artificial intelligence who lives inside his polymer glove, and together you will unearth what Atomic Heart really is. Now, I will stop there because the game is there for you to play if you want to learn more, but as for my thoughts, I've really been enjoying the story in Atomic Heart. The narrative is compelling to me, particularly due to its underlying mystery. I also appreciate how it's conveyed through several different methods of storytelling, including cutscenes, regular character dialogue, environmental storytelling, terminals, banter between P3 and Charles, and other methods. For instance, you can collect chirpers in the game that allow you to listen to recordings of characters to learn more about the game's lore while you continue to play. This was one of my favorite aspects of BioShock, and I was close to saying that it was also one of my favorite aspects of Atomic Heart, but no, that would be something else. In the game, you can also talk to dead bodies, which often unveil details about the moments before their death, their backgrounds, and more. I'll let the game explain how specifically that works, but for me, it was such a great, unique way of learning even more about the lore and the plot. Now, admittedly, sometimes the game does a little bit too much with the story. Without getting into too many specifics, at times it can feel unnecessarily complex, and at other times it may try a little bit too hard to make certain plot points too obvious and on the nose. There have also been moments where elements of the storytelling just feel drawn out, almost as if the game is trying to boost playtime up, and I just wanted it to get to the next bit. However, the effort is very much still there, and I do appreciate it, even though it might not be perfect. Some may also feel the story is a bit too similar to BioShock, and while the comparisons definitely are there, I do feel like it does just enough to distinguish itself, though it may not be enough for others. But regardless, overall, I'm still enjoying Atomic Heart's story, and I can't wait to see it play out even further. Alrighty, let's move on to graphics. As you've probably seen in this video, and I hope you've been watching it in 4K if you can, the game is absolutely stunning. With Unreal Engine 4 at the helm, visual fidelity and details are incredibly high, lighting and shadows are gorgeous, character models are solid, and I love the use of colors. Admittedly, I've always been a fan of games which crank up the saturation, but I don't think Atomic Heart actually overdoes that. The art style is also beautiful too, leaning on the realistic side but still stylized enough to match the craziness of the game's plot. I've mentioned this series already in this video, and it certainly won't be the last time, but visually the game feels very BioShock Infinity, especially with some of the set pieces you experience. And while I definitely enjoy my time exploring the gritty, dark interiors, really it is outdoors where the game absolutely shines, with some seriously impressive environments and textures. And the real beauty, the game ran almost flawlessly for me. Now, to be clear, your mileage may vary. I am playing on a PC using an RTX 3090 and an i9 12900K. So while this isn't the most up-to-date system in the world, it is still a high-end build. And though I played on max settings, I still made sure to turn on DLSS, though using the quality mode. And thanks to this combination, gameplay was a super smooth 4K 60 FPS, and I only had frame drops in some combat scenarios and other weird occasions like when trying to climb certain objects. Now, could I have played at a higher frame rate? Yes, but keep in mind I was having to capture footage at the same time as playing, and my capture card's frame rate is actually capped at 60 FPS anyways. So what about console? Well, Mundfish has confirmed that the game will run at 4K 60 on Xbox Series X and PS5 in interiors, but once you're outside in the open world, the game does make use of dynamic resolution but still playing at 60 FPS. So if you are concerned about performance on your chosen platform or GPU, it is best to look out for reviews from people using that hardware. But as for my experience, especially for a new game that is just about to launch, I am absolutely impressed with the performance and graphics of Atomic Heart. The game also has a nice suite of options for you to tweak things until your heart's content. It even has a streamer mode to allow you to stream the game without any worry of copyright strikes, and that's what I've been doing in my playthrough. It is clear that serious thought has gone into the technical side of Atomic Heart. The game also doesn't have loading screens, though while this technically is true on paper, it is very obvious where those loading screens are being hidden in the game, i.e. in suspiciously long elevator rides and the like. Though the game does balance this out with dialogue, and it's as seamless as a video game can be. Now, the sound design of Atomic Heart is unfortunately one of its weaker points. In combat scenarios, it's totally fine. Guns sound like guns, skills and energy weapons sound cool, and so on. It is also very clear when a track from Mick Gordon starts to play in the game, and he, as you would expect, is as incredible as always. In one boss battle in particular, I suddenly felt all amped up to kill some robots, and very quickly realized it was thanks to Mick Gordon's music. But there are other aspects of the game's audio and sound which aren't so good. For instance, I found a bit of an issue with the music placement in the game. Sometimes I feel a music track doesn't quite match the mood, and other times it feels either way too loud or just completely out of place. There might actually be some bugs at play here, especially when combat music starts playing out of nowhere and there are no enemies around, but it's still noteworthy. In addition to this, the English VO is really cringy. I selected it initially because that's what you do when playing most video games. Select the language which you speak and understand. However, the characters just sounded really off, with the worst being the main character, P3. He does talk a lot in the game, and while that's certainly not a bad thing per se, it did keep highlighting how cringeful his dialogue actually was. A lot of the things he was saying just sounded weird, like he was trying too hard to be funny. This definitely started to drag as the game progressed. And don't get me wrong, that is meant to be his character, so the dialogue and the writing of the game has some blame here, but I just did not like his English voiceover at all. So I highly recommend that you play this game with Russian VO and English subtitles. Kind of like watching anime in Japanese, it sounds much more authentic and was more enjoyable as a result. Yes, it is hard to read subtitles when you're trying to not die from enemies, because that does happen sometimes, but outside of that, it is totally fine. Though I do believe Mundfish should include an option to increase the size of the subtitles, because they were on the smaller size on my PC and couldn't be changed. Now let's finally get to the gameplay. Atomic Heart is a typical FPS action game. You have a bunch of guns and equipment at your disposal, from assault rifles to shotguns, energy weapons, rocket launchers, melee weapons, and more. You can also upgrade these guns and melee weapons, more on this later, including with cartridges that add elemental effects, which change their effectiveness against certain enemies. And the actual gunplay, while feeling a little clunky at times, is still solid overall and ticks all the basic boxes. I'm having fun with it, and I think most people will. Just don't expect it to absolutely blow you away. Then you have skills like Shock, where you can discharge electricity towards enemies and other objects, Polymeric Shield, where you can cover your character with a shield temporarily, Frostbite, where you can freeze and slow down enemies, and Mass Telekinesis, where you can suspend and damage enemies in the air temporarily. Does any of this sound familiar? Yes, they're just like plasmids in Bioshock, but to be honest, that is by no means a bad thing. The feature was fun then and it's fun now. Though, unlike Bioshock, on top of the base Shock skill, you can only equip 2 other skills at any one time, and I wish this number was higher. Often I just found myself relying on 2 specific skills that I knew were effective in most scenarios, thereby neglecting any experimentation with the others. If those skills were on hand at all times, I may have been more willing to try them out every now and again. Now, all of your skills can be upgraded at Red Nora machines throughout the game, giving them enhanced or special effects. For instance, Shock can be upgraded to deal more damage and push enemies back, Mass Telekinesis to lift heavier enemies, and so on. Your character even has skills that can be upgraded too, including increasing your health, quickening your running speed, reducing how much physical damage you take, etc. All upgrades to skills require a certain amount of neuropolymer to unlock, a substance that you can collect throughout the game. And it all essentially operates on a skill tree basis. More powerful upgrades costing a lot of neuropolymer can only be selected once you've activated all previous skills. I never really found that these upgrades were meaningless either. In fact, some gave me a huge upper hand in combat, so you do want to choose them carefully. Though the beauty of this system is that you can respec your skill choices at any Nora machine for free. No penalty. So if you ever pick a skill or an upgrade that you just don't like, then simply respec and try something different. These Nora machines are literally everywhere too. Plus, you can also craft and upgrade your weapons at Nora machines by installing specific parts and then upgrading those parts with better effects. Some of these upgrades can also give your weapons unique secondary attacking modes, like charging up a large EMP blast or a unique powerful attacking swing for your melee weapon. These additional upgrades I especially enjoyed, and for some of the weapons, I found myself using them again and again. It added a nice little bit of depth to the gameplay and gunplay. Keep in mind though that a lot of these upgrades require you to collect the necessary blueprints, which you can find throughout the game. Now this is probably the best time to tell you that for better or for worse, Atomic Heart requires you to loot a lot. There is no leveling system in this game. All the game's skills and upgrades that will make you stronger require materials that can only be obtained through looting neuropolymers and other materials. So if you do want to get your character powerful as quickly as possible, you better scour every single room you're in and loot every possible enemy. This is by no means a bad thing. Personally, I love games like Fallout where looting is key, but some of you might not like that, and that's okay, it isn't for everyone. And you don't have to loot like crazy like I do, though you may find yourself at a slight disadvantage with some of the enemies in the game as they naturally do get more powerful as you play. But at the very least, Atomic Heart makes looting quite easy. You immediately get access to a scan ability which allows you to see containers you haven't looted yet, and to loot, all you need to do is hold a button and it automatically loots the containers you are looking at, instead of needing to individually press to loot every single container. This is definitely a feature that I appreciated. Now speaking of enemies, the game does have a decent variety. A lot of them are robots, and understandably that is the point of the game, but they all have unique attacking styles, and even if they look the same, they might actually be a more powerful variant, which sometimes takes you off guard. And while at times some enemies are pretty easy to kill, they aren't always a complete walk in the park. Playing the game on normal, I still had to dodge, use the appropriate weapon, and combine my skills to take out enemies, especially when they swarmed you in groups. And if you don't, you will need to heal quicker than you think. The game also has some fun mini boss battles too, which I really loved. Often they provided a unique challenge and weren't simply just bullet sponges. For instance, there is a mini boss which is more susceptible to melee damage, and another which requires the use of ground traps in the arena in order to damage it properly. These are things that again I think add a nice layer of depth to the gameplay. Now in terms of general traversal, the game also requires you to solve a lot of puzzles in order to progress. Initially this starts off with simple lockpicking, but then other varieties of puzzles are introduced, particularly in certain buildings and dungeons which are unique to the location that you're in. The lockpicking isn't just like Fallout or Elder Scrolls style either. Yes, there are those for sure, but there are also others which are unique and fun. So far, none of these puzzles have felt super tedious either. They've all been pretty enjoyable and things that I could solve relatively quickly. Though there are sections which require you to climb, and the climbing in Atomic Heart is very clunky. It never feels natural or seamless. P3 often has to shift into a new position in order to climb or jump in another direction, and this process always feels a little bit rough. So overall, I feel the gameplay and combat in Atomic Heart is fun and I'm enjoying it. Just don't expect it to completely reinvent the wheel. Finally, I will include a section on bugs. All things considered, for a new game that is so close to launch, there honestly aren't that many bugs and I've been fairly happy with my experience, but I still need to mention them. In my about 20 hours of gameplay, I've had one crash. On one occasion, the game menu wouldn't open properly, so I had to hard exit out of the game. Sometimes buttons don't press properly, especially when you're using a controller on PC. Yes, I do this, don't laugh. And there's actually a weird bug where certain menus in the Nora machine are actually unusable if you just use a controller on a PC without a keyboard plugged in, which is something that I noticed because I use the one keyboard between two different PCs using a Switch while still playing on my gaming PC with a controller. It's a unique problem for sure, but still one worth mentioning. I also said that sometimes music plays randomly even when it feels like it's not meant to, and this can be kind of jarring. Sometimes certain enemy sounds get stuck and replay until you save and reload as well. The game also got an update in the middle of my review period which prevented me from turning on VSync in the game menu, so I had to force this on through NVIDIA control panel. There's also the small issue where you can still use health packs even though your character's health is full, which can lead to some wastage if you accidentally press the button. So yes, Atomic Heart does have bugs, like any game, but none of them for me were absolutely game-breaking. And compared to other games at launch, I feel Atomic Heart is actually well above standard. But again, especially when it comes to bugs, your mileage may vary. Alright, so overall, I've actually really enjoyed my time with Atomic Heart and I can't wait to complete the entire game. If you are a fan of Bioshock or similar kinds of immersive sims, even though Atomic Heart isn't quite one, I still think you would have a good or even great time with the amount of inspiration it takes from the genre. It's fun, beautiful, compelling, crazy, and everything in between. If you're unsure, you can try the game out on Game Pass of course, and decide whether to make the full purchase or not. But for me, it's a game that I recommend. I actually feel like it could sneak its way into Game of the Year lists, especially in the FPS or action categories. And while I can't yet say for sure that this game is going to sit on my top games of all time or anything crazy like that, if it keeps this up and the story has some great twists, then it might get close, we'll see. So until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer, please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.